Hello, and welcome to Minisode 41.
Yay!
What are we talking about?
We're talking about intensity, which I don't know how vague and ambiguous that word is going to be.
Very.
Okay.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
So, okay, well, I guess this is the start of the conversation, isn't it? Like, what is intensity? Because I feel like to you it might be something different to me. But I always thought it was like, I don't know what kind of G forces or whatever it is, but you know when you're on what's the type of ride that Nemesis is?
Inverted coaster.
When you're on those kind of rides, the intensity is quite high. Like it feels like a lot of force on your body, and it's like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to describe it really. You can feel like pressure all over you, kind of thing, which I guess is like you being pushed in your seat or whatever.
Yeah.
But what kind of G force is that?
Well, so this is the thing, and there's like, as you said, there's like loads of different layers to this, the different types of intensity. So you've got positive G forces, which I think is the kind of like main thing people associate with intensity.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'd say there's other elements.
Yeah, I'd say like, for example, on the Smiler, because you're doing so many inversions all the time, even though it's not always positive Gs or whatever, it's quite intense because there's so much packed in. It's like bam, bam, bam,
Yeah,
bam.
I agree. So then pacing adds to intensity if it's just back to back. So then I'd call that like relentless.
Yeah.
It's just you're constantly doing something.
Yeah.
But then that's, as you said, very different to like a positive G-force intensity.
Right.
I'd also say you can have intensity through like speed and chaos. So my example would be a wooden roller coaster just feels more intense sometimes because it kind of rattles around and it feels faster.
So it's rougher.
Yeah, and I think that in a way can also add to intensity.
Yeah, because if you said which one's more intense, Galactica or Wicker Man, even though both of them don't really have many G forces, or I guess Galactica does, but I'd say Wicker Man's probably more intense.
Yeah, and on paper, Galactica probably has higher positive G forces.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel as bad because it's smoother.
Exactly. So I think smoothness has a large part to play in it. And like, so a ride like Carnan for me, it's intense with its positive G forces, but it's also very chaotic.
Yeah, so it's double. Yeah. It's like 2 out of 3 things.
Exactly. It's like, it's a lot. It's just a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And what you find with some of the most intense rides, like I-305, Intimidator 305, is that after you ride them a lot, you feel worn out.
Yeah.
I remember riding Carnan 8 times in a day.
Oh my God.
I was just like dead after it.
Yeah.
And I've heard similar stories with I-305 and just riding that a few times. And there's some coasters out there that do that.
Yeah.
That really kind of are a lot to ride and a lot to deal with. The main type is definitely positive G-forces.
Yeah, because then it's like sometimes you black out, don't you?
Yeah.
With the forces and everything.
Yeah.
Which must be tiring.
I think there's a misconception with like intensity that G-force, like the amount of G-force on paper, is linked to how intense a ride is. And that just can't be further from the truth. Like I think Nemesis's maximum G-force is something like 3.5 or 4, and Nemesis Inferno has more like a higher amount of G-force than the original Nemesis does. But Nemesis, the original one, feels more intense.
Yeah, that's weird.
Well, it's because G-force is a thing of 2 halves. You've got your actual kind of like number, so how much G are you being subject to, but then you also got how long I being subjected to that G-force for.
And on original Nemesis, aren't you subjected to it for like ages? So it might only be like a 2.5, but when you're in a 2.5 for 5 seconds, that's quite intense.
Exactly, and that's the difference. A ride might peak at 4G.
Yeah, but you're only there for
of a second,
exactly.
And that's not going to do anything.
You can cope with that.
But 2.5, 3Gs over 3 seconds.
Yeah,
is going to feel more intense than 5G for like 0.2 of a second.
Yeah.
And when we speak of intensity, most enthusiasts, it's the it's the long, kind of drawn out, intense moments.
Yeah.
Like Helix on Nemesis. As you go around that, you're subject to quite a lot of G-force, and it's very sustained. For like 2-3 seconds.
Yeah.
Same with Intimidator 305 going on that first turn. you're subjected to high G-forces for like 3 or 4 seconds.
I'd say also like the corkscrews on Colossus at Thorpe Park, because they're so big and like you're upside down for ages turning, and then you got like 5 in a row or whatever.
You mean the Heartline rolls at the end?
That's the one, yeah. Whereas if you did that like quickly on I don't know what different ride has that, like a quick version of it, just one, like even though it's the same thing, just doing one quickly would be actually quite fun. Whereas like 5 in a row where it's really slow is just a lot of stuff. Like it's very intense.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the same idea of like you can have something that's short and quick, but if you drag it out, it becomes intense. But only if you drag it out.
It's interesting. I think, as you said, people's idea of intensity is very different. And
well, it's subjective, isn't it? Because there's no actual like, how can we measure it if? Because going by the numbers, like you say, you can't really measure it because of it's the length and the speed and everything all together, the layout of the ride, blah, blah, blah. There's so many factors that you can't really like specifically measure, oh, this ride is so intense and this one's so intense. Like it doesn't really work.
No, you're right. Definitely. But I think, the general consensus is rides that have high positive G-forces generally more intense.
Likely to be more intense.
I think that's your kind of fundamental bottom layer intensity, and then you build upon that. You know, but then wooden coasters, as I said, they don't really pull high positive G-forces because they can't, because they're made out of wood.
Yeah.
So their intensity is different from the fact that they're wooden and they're not, completely following the curve of the track. They're kind of rattling around inside the track.
Yeah.
Adds to the intensity of the ride, and then they just generally feel maybe a bit more open, and I don't know, they feel different, and that adds to the intensity.
Yeah.
So, I think you get different rides with different intensity levels.
What would you say that intensity is like on your list of things that a coaster needs to be?
On my list, it's not on everyone. Well, and this goes back to, you can have like negative G-force intensity where you're just being subject to back to back to back to back airtime hills just constantly. It's different, but and most people would prefer that to positive intensity. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't like positive intensity.
Or don't like a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of it.
But I feel like based on your top rides, you do like intensity in general.
Well, because I want a roller coaster that's balanced. I want one that doesn't just do one thing well, it does multiple things well, which your usual airtime machines just don't. Like.
But also you like the specific kind of intensity where it's like relentless.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just positive like intensity.
No,
but you like relentless, like throw you about kind of thing.
Exactly. I want part of the ride to be positively intense, but I want all of the ride to be relentless from start to finish. There isn't any time to breathe. It's all like, here we go. Yeah. And keeping up the pace. But I don't think it's not for everyone.
It's not for me.
Well, just the fact that certain rides are so popular, like Taron isn't a relentless coaster, I wouldn't say.
No.
Because it has so many stop and start moments in it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call it intense either.
No.
But it's enjoyed because it's re-rideable.
Yeah.
And often you find that intense rides aren't re-rideable.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So in most people's mind, and even in mine, like Boulder isn't intense in any shape of the word.
But surely it should be, because it's like negative after negative.
But is it intense? Would you call it intense?
It's difficult because like obviously it's on a scale, so I wouldn't necessarily put intense as like one of the top descriptors. No. But I would say it's way more intense than a lot of other rides.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is, because
in the fact that it's like wooden, so it's rattly.
Yeah, but it's not that rattly. It doesn't.
No,
feel
but
rattly.
Like it's a different feeling than a steel coaster. And then it's got a lot of negatives.
Yeah, it can be relentless in parts,
Yeah.
Depends how it's running, I guess. But I don't know, that when you think about, you do your checkbox, it doesn't really check as many of my boxes.
No.
But then I still like it because it's re-rideable and it's just fun.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. Some rides that should be good on paper aren't, and some rides that shouldn't be good on paper are.
Yeah.
Just based on how it kind of rides itself.
So I think what we're saying is the ride needs to be it needs to have elements of intensity, but if the whole thing's going to be intense, I don't know, because I feel like you could say, oh, if the whole ride's intense and it's just going to be too much. But then there's examples where I would say, oh, this ride's all the way intense, but it's still very good.
Yeah, Helix is relatively intense in terms of the pacing of it is relentless, and it has intense moments, but it isn't overly intense.
Yeah, but then something like the Smiler or Nemesis, I'd say they're both like very intense rides, but they're still very good. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But then I'd say if I was creating a ride, I wouldn't make it that intense because it's harder to get it right when it's that intense.
Yeah.
Especially like as people won't want to go on it 1,000 times.
It is hard to get it right, for sure. There's a line that you can definitely cross if you go too far, you make it.
Well, obviously, because you
appealing.
just like kill people with
well,
the
not
Gs.
just that, but like certain rides are less appealing to
it's
everyone
just a lot
because it's a lot. Yeah, I think you find that with Intimidator 205 sometimes is it's a lot for people, so they don't perhaps ride it multiple times. They just got it once.
Intimidating by any chance?
Well, who would have guessed? That's not why it's called that.
Is it not?
No.
It should be.
No. But yeah, no, it's definitely subjective, and everyone will like different things. But I think the general consensus is people don't like intensity as much as they say they do.
You think?
Yeah, for sure.
You think that's something people go, oh, rides have to be this, and intense.
Yeah.
And then when they actually ride an intense one, they're like,
yeah,
maybe not.
Because I think a lot of people as well, and this comes up a lot on Nemesis and even Kanon, think that intensity is roughness, right?
Yeah.
People call Nemesis rough. I don't think that's right. I think Nemesis is intense and it throws you about. That isn't roughness.
Yeah, because I'd say, because if we're talking about the categories of intensity we've just talked about, Nemesis fits the one where it's like positive, a lot of positive force, which is, to me, what makes it intense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's rough. It's actually quite smooth.
Yeah, but people call it rough all the time.
No, because rough would be like Colossus, where it rattles your head around.
It rattles your head around, even in parts where it's slow and boring.
Yeah, or like any wooden coaster from Blackpool, because it just rattles. Like, that's rough. Yeah. Or, for example, I think Saw at Thorpe Park is quite rattly.
Yeah, it can be.
That's the kind of vibe. But I feel like, the word rough is sometimes like subbed in for intense.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And it's the same with Kanon. It's like Kanon, it rattles in some of the really intense parts, especially when you're being thrown side to side.
Yeah.
Right, but it's like, well, if it was going like 2 miles per hour on a straight piece of track, it wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's literally only because it's going 70 miles per hour through this like really tight turn, you know. And
but I think roughness can be intense, because we talked about this before.
You're
like
right.
The Smiler's quite like intense in the fact that it's like quite rattly and like goes really quick and does loads of stuff.
Yeah.
Rough in that sense can be a subsection of intensity, but I wouldn't say that Nemesis is rough.
No.
I'd say it's intense in a different way. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So in a way they're not wrong, but they are, because it's not rough. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. I guess some rides are intense because they are rough. But yeah, as you said, it's kind of different intense. And then you can make the argument that if you have a ride that's perhaps too smooth, it loses intensity.
Yeah.
Just because there isn't anything, you know.
Because, for example, Swarm, that's got a lot of positive Gs, especially the last bit.
Yeah.
But because it's so smooth, I wouldn't overall call it intense, because it's so gentle, even though there's a lot of positives. So I feel like it has to have like at least 2 of the 3 types of intensity for it to be called overall intense.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just not enough stuff. Okay, let's see what everyone else actually thought, because we've been speculating what everyone else thinks, but... It's Laura W says, I don't mind intensity, but I don't like it when a whole ride is focused on that, as it's harder to enjoy.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much what we said, really, isn't it?
Yeah. There's like a level at which it's peak intensity, where it's like, good, it makes the ride better, but it's not overkill of like, this is just too much now. Which I feel like that's why I don't like Nemesis, because to me, it's above my threshold of like a good level of intensity. It's just too much for me. So it just ruins it.
I can't say this. I just butchered that. If I could set a maximum intensity, that is, I would say Black Mamba or in general B&M inverts. If a coaster is more intense than these, many people will ignore it.
Mm.
And it goes back to what we were saying about, you know, if you make it too intense, just people generally like it less.
Yeah.
Because it's less re-rideable.
Because it probably looks more intimidating from off-ride.
I don't know that's true.
And also it might just get a reputation of being like quite a thrilling coaster.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
And it will. That's the thing. It will get a reputation for that.
BGW enthusiast said, I just like this kind of a point we've already had, but I just like what they said. It's like cooking with strong flavours. Too much can kill a ride for me. Very true.
Yeah, no, it's true. Nathan says intensity is mega important. Nothing like a powerful launch or positive G moment to shove you into your seat. I think, as I said, my ideal ride definitely has those elements.
Yeah.
So it's something I always look for. I think some rides have it more than others, and you know, not every single of my top coasters have really big, intense moments, but generally I prefer them. Drew
Goronski 5 says, if intensity is also met with airtime, it's amazing.
Definitely. I got a similar one here from Wolfman96. I like intensity to a certain degree. If it's a nice combination of strong positives and negatives, it's more enjoyable for me than a ride with just strong positives. This is it. It's all about that balance. The best coasters are the ones that have multiple attributes and aren't just the same thing over and over again.
I feel like everything we talk about on this podcast is like, this thing, but in moderation. Like every single time. But it's like, intensity's really cool, but we can't be having too much of it.
Well, this is it. But yeah,
I feel like that's just life in general.
Yeah. I mean, I people like roller coasters that are one-trick ponies and like just constant one thing, but I don't know, I just prefer when a ride does more than one thing. Yeah. You know? And it's kind of like why I like Helix more than Terran. It's because Helix, it feels like it does so much more.
More variety.
Yeah. You're not always just whipping through turns, and some of them are slow and a bit like, where are we going with this? You know, Terran has its fantastic elements, and I think Terran has higher highs sometimes than Helix has. But Helix is just generally more consistently good. Yeah. And it feels like you're doing more, feels like more of a journey, and you're achieving more. I don't know. Yeah. And I think it's through variety.
The balance of everything is good.
The fact that it has stronger airtime, like sustained stronger airtime than Terran, and then like fantastic use of different inversions, which obviously Terran doesn't have. It just, feels like it does more.
Yeah. So that's it for this episode. If you want to give us a review, go for it. Go to iTunes and pop a little comment on there. And you can find us on our website if you want to leave us a voice message for next episode, because every week we put a new voice message topic on there. So get on there if you want to speak to us directly. And just stay tuned on Twitter for what our next categories will be.
Twitter and Instagram at CBR Podcast on Twitter, and then just at CoasterPod on Instagram. Yeah, if you want to take part and have your thoughts read out, then just do so. Please do.